They just need natural remedies and yoga.
Can the schizophrenic start on this?
Yes. They'll see like a case or whatever, and they'll just immediately say, this is a demon, it needs to come out. It's the easiest and quickest way to get somebody to become worse because we're not actually addressing what's going on.
I have had therapists dump me so many times, abandoned by your therapist or your psychiatrist because you're just too much. It's like, oh, okay, you're just kind of validating that.
Although over 20% of adults in America live with some form of mental illness, those who have them still frequently deal with misconceptions about their conditions. So we sat down with 3 guests diagnosed with BPD, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia to respond to your assumptions. Longtime viewers may also recognize Kody Green from our earlier I Spent a Day with People with Schizophrenia episode. Now, let's get into it. Before we do an assumption, I want to start by talking about what was y'all's process like getting a diagnosis?
It was last year. I had a period of time where I couldn't really create, and I was dealing with like these long extended periods of like dry spells and also like periods of very intense irritation. I would get irritated at the slightest things, and I didn't like what was happening. Like, you know, a few times I would throw like my camera gear because I was just upset with the fact that I couldn't create. So I sought some help, talking to my therapist for a while. He suspected I was bipolar, and then we confirmed with a psychiatrist. So that was my process.
I had a very traumatic childhood, and when I was about 19 years old, I was diagnosed with bipolar 2, and I always knew that it just didn't seem right. I felt like, you know, there always was something more. I was struggling with self-harm and fear of abandonment and all of these things, like extreme 0 to 100. And so I went back and was like, I don't think this is right. And so I read about BPD. I had never really heard of it before other than the stigmatization of it. And so when I talked to my psychiatrist, she was like, oh, yeah, this makes sense. So then we did all the testing for it. And then I was diagnosed in about, I think it was 2017.
So I started having delusions, hallucinations when I was about 19 years old. And unfortunately, I fell into addiction for a couple years before I actually sought help. I was raised by a mother with schizoaffective disorder, so I knew what hallucinations and what delusions look like in a person. Unfortunately, I was so delusional at that time that I didn't think there was anything wrong with me. So a few years later, after I was kind of getting over my struggles with addiction and getting out of incarceration, I finally asked for some help. And my process of diagnosis went fairly quickly because my mom had schizoaffective disorder, and there is a genetic component to these illnesses. So I was really fortunate in my own journey, unlike her journey where she got misdiagnosed and she got the wrong medication, the wrong treatment. I got put through the system pretty quickly. I got a psychiatrist that was able to do the testing and get me a proper diagnosis and medication almost immediately. So
People with mental illnesses are just faking it for attention.
I get this one a lot, and mostly because I built my page around talking about my mental illness. To me, this is crazy because most people with mental illness are pretending not to have it instead of having it, you know?
Exactly.
And it frustrates me because people are like, well, clearly you're faking it to make money and get internet famous. What they don't see is the 5 years before I started making content, the delusions and hallucinations and paranoia I struggled with, the years of addiction and incarceration I struggled with. Like, I went through all that, and now I'm just trying to help people better understand the illness so they can get help for themselves, for friends or family members. But they don't see that, you know? They see a video of me having symptoms and assume I'm faking it for some sort of attention.
Yeah.
The issue is there's been only a few cases, but it has happened where people have found out that someone was faking like an illness like Tourette's or something like that. And so it becomes a big scandal, and now they assume every content creator who talks about an illness or something is faking it.
Right.
I think it's better for people to, like I said, understand why someone is expressing these things. It's not always that we're just seeking attention or that people are faking it. Sometimes we're doing it to help other people, and then sometimes it's therapeutic for us, and other times people do it because they don't know how to ask for help. So that's the way that they kind of get their message out there that maybe they do need assistance, but they're afraid of of how people will perceive them.
I've dealt with years of trauma my entire life, and if now you think I'm faking what I'm going through, then good luck with your life. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I can't fight it. And it is just really frustrating though, because it's like when you're being vulnerable and you're, wanting to help other people, and then it's like criticized, and like people just don't understand it. It's like people fear the things that they can't understand or they don't understand. So people can't understand being vulnerable and opening up about something like this because it's so, it's very deep. And people don't understand that, so they will make up excuses as to why it's wrong or why, it's bad that we do it, or, whatever. And it's mainly, I think, because they can't understand it.
How would you respond to the take that nowadays everyone has a mental illness?
I mean, this is a really common comment anymore. And what people don't realize is the reason this is more common is because we have better insight, information, and diagnosing. If you look at how schizophrenia was treated years and years ago, you see a lot of like really harmful tactics, really dangerous ways of dealing with it because they didn't know what it was. They really didn't know how to deal with it. That illness was there, same with every other illness, but we didn't have a term for it. We didn't know how to properly diagnose it. And so it didn't exist.
I just cannot stand it when people are like, oh, it's trendy to have BPD. It's like, no, people are just talking about it more because we're comfortable to talk about it more. And that's where we're at in society.
It's so much more common than people think because schizophrenia affects 1 in 100 people. So if you've met more than 100 people, you've probably met someone with schizophrenia. A lot of people don't know that. One, because if a person's living healthy with schizophrenia, you might never know that. Day to day, if people met me, they would never know that I live with schizophrenia. If I have hallucinations or delusions, it becomes very obvious very quickly. But like most days, no one could ever tell. And so like if I wasn't on social media, I don't know that I would be telling people. Like, I think that's what most people, and I know from my comment section, that's what a lot of people tell me. They're like, I'm too afraid to tell anyone. So I live my day-to-day life like everything's fine and everything's okay.
A lot of people assume that y'all are dangerous.
Being not only schizophrenic, but someone with a past of addiction and a criminal record, and being, 6 foot and covered in tattoos, I do get this one a lot, where people assume that by the very nature of my illness that I'm in some way more dangerous than the rest of the population. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm super nice. I really struggle when I'm having symptoms, but it's never like a dangerous thing. I'm usually scared, confused. In those moments, I just need assistance. I'm not a danger to anyone. And when there are issues with someone being dangerous with a severe mental illness, they're always publicized so quickly, and like it becomes a media spectacle. So that's what people know of mental illness and schizophrenia is like what they see on the news or what they saw on a crime TV show. Instead of like the reality of most people with severe mental illness are actually more likely to be the victims of violent crime than the perpetrators. If all you ever see is this misinformation, that's all you're going to know.
It's really sad because the stigma that is placed upon us is unacceptable, but also a lot of times people don't realize, like you said before, that we have gone through trauma. That is why we have these illnesses, at least in my case, and that stigma placed on us is just perpetuating, these things that aren't true.
People with mental illnesses don't need medications. They just need natural remedies and yoga.
Can the schizophrenic start on this one? So I get this daily in my comment sections. Some of those things can be beneficial in addition to medication and treatment. But to say that you could cure or fix a mental illness just by doing that is not only misinformation, but it's dangerous. There's already such a stigma around mental illness. What we also have created, though, is a stigma around medication and treatment. We've created this fear around medication that it's in some way bad. I would not be sitting here today if it wasn't for medication. And so I think promoting those things in addition is wonderful, but acting like it can solve the issue, in my opinion, is dangerous.
I was okay with other people taking medication, but for myself, I was very against it because I was afraid of what it would do to my personality, my creativity, just how I live my life. And so I was open to the idea, but I told my therapist, like, I kind of want to raw dog it. I kind of want to just like see if I can manage it myself. And then it started going like this. And I'm like, well, there's only so much walking you could, because I used to walk like for 2 miles a day around the neighborhood, but it wouldn't be enough. Sometimes I would feel like I need a little bit of extra something. And once I started taking my medication, I've noticed it's all part of the equation.
If you're having manic symptoms or hearing voices, you're clearly possessed by a demon.
Oh my God.
So I come from a religious background. I'm actually the organist at my church. So I've heard and seen this in action where people will be clearly struggling with something, or they'll see like a case or whatever, and they'll just immediately say, this is a demon, it needs to come out. You need to be exorcised. It's just not, it's very dismissive. I think it's the easiest and quickest way to get somebody to become worse because we're not actually addressing what's going on.
I just can't, because it's so silly. It's literally so silly. It's like, really? Okay, that's your opinion? Yeah. Like, I can't even entertain it because it's so dismissive. I like that word, yeah.
And as the schizophrenic person, I imagine I get the most of these comments.
Absolutely.
Because, I do post videos of me having active hallucinations and how I react. And one of the most common, dismissive comments I get is about it being demons and it being some sort of possession, to the point where people have recommended exorcisms to me. I've had pastors reach out and say they would perform an exorcism on me. When I've questioned people, I'm like, well, if schizophrenia is demons, why does my medication work? And people will actually come in my comments and be like, that medication is specifically to ward off demons. I'm like, that is next level technology there. And it's so dangerous, especially to someone with schizophrenia, because one of the most common types of delusions for people with schizophrenia is religious delusions.
Yes.
Yeah. So believing they're God or believing they're speaking to God. And so by telling someone with schizophrenia that I have demons in me and I need to find God or get an exorcism is so incredibly dangerous. Yeah. It could spiral into a delusion so quick. The reason I stopped participating in religion and going to church was when my mom was first diagnosed. I was still a kid. I was still going to church a lot. I was a teenager, and I remember someone in the congregation of my hometown telling me that because my mom had schizophrenia, she was going to hell because she wasn't getting rid of the demons inside of her. And so that was one of the things that separated me from religion was I couldn't believe that someone would believe that. My mom was at her worst, was terrified, confused. She was never dangerous. Definitely didn't have demons. Like you said, it's to the point where it's silly. It's hard to address seriously at this point because to me it is just such a ridiculous concept.
Yeah.
I have BPD, and I know an assumption is that we're all angry and evil, but every emotion we feel is times 1,000.
A lot of people really don't understand the intensity that comes with each emotion that we are facing. And so the best analogy that I've heard is that people with BPD feel emotions like we have third-degree burns all over our body. And so it's such an intense situation where it's it's not just mad, it's deep, deep anger. And it's not just sad, it's the lowest form of sad, depressive state you've ever been in, And so it's hard to kind of understand that. It is unfortunate that people are oh, you're just always so angry and stuff, but there's a lot of complexity to it.
I, in my time being a mental health advocate, have a lot of bad perceptions of BPD because I've only ever heard, and even by doctors and counselors and mental health advocates online talk about it in such a negative way. Yeah. And so and people that I've trusted with other information and really believed what they said. So that's got to be you're not only combating general online hate. I feel like you're combating professionals and people that should be better explained. I've heard doctors drop patients because of BPD and stuff.
Yeah, I've been dropped. I have had therapists dump me so many times, and the abandonment. I've had abandonment my
You already
had
abandonment.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and then being so abandoned by your therapist or your psychiatrist because you're just too much or whatever. It's okay, you're just kind of validating that, but that's fine. Move forward. But yeah, it's
doesn't make sense to me. How do you understand what somebody is going through, and then you're let me just make this worse for you.
Exactly.
I'm gonna
let me take all your fears and your doubts and amplify them.
Thank you.
One assumption from Beetle Blink said that people with mental disorders are tired of people mixing up their disorders with other different disorders.
I think a lot of people confuse bipolar disorder with BPD. I think people think BPD stands for bipolar disorder. And I get that so often. I don't necessarily blame anybody for like the mix up because there's not enough education on it. In schools growing up, like there's a plethora of things that we should be learning that include mental health. It would be a lot easier for people to understand and, not have that stigma and be able to tell the difference and know what the difference is.
I often get schizophrenia, people thinking that schizophrenia is DID, or what used to be known as multiple personality disorder. And so the definition of schizophrenia involves like the split mind. And so people associate it with like movies like Split or like because they don't know the difference between DID and schizophrenia. That's one I get all the time. There are people who will confuse like bipolar 2 disorder with because there are people with bipolar disorder that can have hallucinations, so they think that they're connected in some way. And there's like the differences we all know, the general public might not know between the disorders that, why they're different diagnoses and why they're not all under the same umbrella.
There are a lot of similarities between them, and I think that's why people confuse them. But there's like key differences on like the time periods that happen between these or how persistent some hallucinations or delusions may be. Because I've had a few delusions and hallucinations, but it's only when I'm manic that I have that. So it's easy to confuse them. So I can see why people kind of mix it up like that.
It's hard for people with mental illnesses to love and to be loved.
I hear this one a lot because when I went through my diagnosis, my wife, she was with me and people were nervous for her. They were like worried that because of my schizophrenia that, we wouldn't be able to maintain our relationship. And we've been together now 12 years. And through the diagnosis, through all the symptoms I had, and it's definitely something where like you need to have more communication if you and your loved one or one of you is struggling with serious mental illness. It's not going to be as easy as some relationships, but it's not impossible to like find someone and maintain a relationship or like find love as a person with mental illness.
Communication really is a key. I think looking back at my previous relationships, I definitely can see how I may have been difficult at times. I thought I was just different. I mean, I am different, but I thought that it was my personality, like, that made me, say certain things the way that I said them, or I would just be taken off guard by when I would be speaking to the person I was with at the time, and they would be offended by the way that I said something or how straightforward I was. And I think in a lot of cases, it's driven people away, but how intense it can be when I'm showing my love, especially during, manic episodes. Like I can be like, let's get married and like, let's do this. And it's not that I'm just trying to, belittle a marriage and just jump into it, but like impulsivity is part of what I experience.
Absolutely.
And I could be in love with this person, but that misjudgment, I guess, during the time would make me want to dive in. So it would scare people away, and I think that would make them feel uncomfortable. And learning myself now, I've been in a relationship for, this will be the 4th year. So it's possible, but like you said, it's communication. You have to be able to talk to your person and say, this is what I'm dealing with right now, or this is what's going on in my head. And then for the most part, like if they love you, then they'll understand your standpoint.
Is it like after a high or like any sort of episode, do y'all feel like whenever it's like you come to, do you feel like, oh, like I can't believe I did that? Or is it like, how have y'all worked through that?
I think my experience will be a little different than your guys's because a lot of my episodes come with delusion, especially when I was struggling with addiction and early on in my diagnosis and before I was diagnosed, I did a lot of things I regret and a lot of things that still to this day don't make sense to me. Decisions I made that, I don't think in the right state of mind I would have made. A large part of that was because I was delusional, I wasn't well. And now, even when I have episodes today, if I have brief moments of delusion or hallucinations, I can look back afterwards and be like, I can't believe I did that or acted this way or said this to someone, And it's almost frustrating for me as someone who was so delusional and unaware to now have this self-awareness. Like it's something I think other people with different mental illnesses deal with all the time. Yeah. It's something that I'm only dealing with now because I'm well medicated. I'm not constantly delusional. Is after the fact, I have to look at these situations and be like, you did this. Or like, this was something that, you did, whether or not you could control it, like it happened and you need to recognize that.
It's a balance between I can't believe I just did that, or I had this period of time where, I was kind of not in my right mind. Other times I would look back and I would think that I was not faking it, but sometimes I'm like, do I really have this illness? Like, am I just making this up in my head? Especially in the beginning, like the first 6 months, I'll say. But even now, I sometimes still struggle with this. After the fact, when I'm normal, I'm like, I don't really think I have an illness because I don't want to. I think it's like I don't want to accept those things that I did.
Yeah, I can understand that for sure. Like the shame that comes after. For example, with my BPD, I will split, which is basically like black and white thinking when you go from, adoring, idolizing, being really stoked on someone basically, and then splitting to where you're like, I hate this person. And it seems really extreme, and it is. Like, it really is. Something will trigger that, whether it's fear of abandonment or whatever, and then you'll go through this cycle of splitting on this person, and then it's like you can lash out, you can say things that you not necessarily mean, or, it's just like, it's so intense, or you're like, oh no, like everything was fine. I probably shouldn't have said that. It wasn't that extreme, and it wasn't as big in my head as I thought it was, in real life.
Y'all can be very sensitive and empathetic despite struggling with your own emotions.
Yeah.
I mean, I think having my illness made me a lot more empathetic. I don't know that I was as understanding about other people's struggles until I went through my own. And I grew up in a small, rural Midwest town where the opinions on people with mental illness, addiction is a fault. It's not, it's not like, oh, this is happening. It's like they did this to themselves. This is their issue. And so for me, it was like I had a lot of those ideologies because it's like that's all I knew. Right. And it wasn't until I went through it myself that I really gained like a lot of insight and respect for people struggling with different illnesses, people struggling with addiction, people that are homeless. Like those things like don't just really happen. That's something that like takes a lot of different issues, and like even incarceration. I was in jail, and a lot of the people I met in jail were people desperately having issues with mental illness and addiction. And it was like, it really changed how I look at everybody.
I've always considered myself an empathetic person. Having my illness and understanding, and especially doing the research into different illnesses, it opens your third eye, for lack of a better term. Like you kind of see, not that you can like judge people or know exactly what they're going through, but you have a better understanding of like, this may be happening because of this reason, or maybe they're dealing with something that I can't see, these invisible disabilities. Because you want to be understood, you understand other people because you know how it must feel to be misunderstood. I find that's dictated a lot of how I see the world now.
People with mental disorders have trouble getting and maintaining a job.
I've gotten jobs before, but it was...
Myth busted.
Yeah, myth busted.
Boom. Take
That's it. I can say that some of the jobs, like I think I've done a pretty good job at those jobs, but there were days where it was tough. And again, I didn't understand why at the time. I was still able to navigate it, but now that I'm self-employed, it feels like I have much more freedom to allow myself the time that I need to recover from an episode, or if I'm depressed and I don't feel like working a particular day, then I can do that without somebody being like, oh, you need to show up to work, But it's not impossible for us to get a job.
I think getting a job was easier than maintaining a job, right?
Yeah.
I think as people with mental illness, that's really our struggle. As someone who has hallucinations and delusions, I've worked in manufacturing and production jobs, and like they would expect me to, even after my diagnosis, I would have a hard time getting approval to leave. But I'm like, would you really want me operating a forklift while hallucinating? Because like I've worked so many different types of jobs and I couldn't maintain them because I had to constantly leave. I was still having symptoms. And so that was, in itself, my biggest struggle, was being able to communicate my needs to a workplace. And before I started doing motivational speaking and comedy full time, I was in a job where I was there for several years. And they knew my situation. They let me leave if I was having symptoms. My coworkers got to the point where they knew what to look for in my symptoms. And so it became a really supportive workplace. But it was years of building that communication with HR and my hiring manager. And so I do a lot of speaking now about mental illness in the workplace because everyone wants to have the general conversation of mental health in the workplace, but it's so generic and it's so like, I hate to say it, it's kind of phony. Like they want to promote a better environment than what it really is.
Let's transition to something lighter. Let's do some memes.
The memes. I'm ready for this.
All right, so it says, me when I change from being happy to being morbidly depressed in 0.264 seconds. And it's a slide right next to a graveyard. It took me a while to like understand what was going on.
That might be more for you guys than me.
Yeah. That's pretty good. I mean, you're like high and then you're like low and then you're there.
You're super down. I think this is pretty good.
Yeah.
I would put this, I don't want to go too high.
Yeah, I don't want to go too high.
I'll put it on A.
Okay.
I'll say A.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
I'll trust your guys' judgment on this one because that doesn't pertain to me so much.
Things that don't exist. Bigfoot, fairies, unicorns, a day without an emotional breakdown. That's really relatable for me.
I love the graphics.
Yeah, it's pretty cute. The Bigfoots, that's honestly so relatable for BPD baddies, man. I would stick with A.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it's up there for sure.
An actual good day, happens. My BPD. It's like a loading bar, searching for problems. I actually like that one.
That one's really good, yeah.
Because I kind of relate to this too. When I'm like, in my depressive episodes. And it's like the window. I got to put this in maybe just because of my childhood with these kind of...
The loading bar?
Yeah. I gotta,
that adds points.
Tell me you're a millennial without telling me you're a millennial.
I'm going to put S for me personally.
Yeah, I'll agree with that for sure. Being told I'll grow out of mental illness someday. Growing into one.
It's coming from what
that one I want to put at the very tippy top.
Yeah, I'd put that in S. That's a good one. Well, and that was one where like I because I didn't show symptoms, I didn't have any symptoms until I went off to college. And so I struggled a little bit with like depressive episodes and stuff, and I was kind of told that like you'll grow out of it someday, like you won't have it. And then psychotic break. So like that one's rough.
That's so relatable.
I'm a fight bipolar disorder. Damn, bipolar disorder got hands.
And he's drinking the water.
I love this for, if you put any mental illness in this, I feel like it could be relatable.
Yeah, that's really good.
I'd put that in
S. That's an S tier.
We're not getting a lot of bad ones, honestly. Like these
are.
I feel like mental illness memes though are so like they can be done so well and so easily.
Yeah.
Because it's like coping with trauma is such a universal thing. I feel like.
Yeah.
But when your mania is gone, but you're still getting packages from Amazon.
Oh no.
This is relatable because when I'm manic, I want to buy stuff so much.
Yeah.
Electronics is my big thing. I don't go too crazy like Amazon packages come in and all that stuff, but I get so close. So I can relate to this. I want to put this was actually pretty funny.
That's S for me because my impulsivity, I'm like, I'm sad right now. I need something for dopamine. Immediately I buy stuff and then my husband's like, where are all these like 25 Amazon packages? Like, why? And I'm like, I don't know her. I don't know how that happened. I may have blacked out and just bought stuff.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'd say S tier.
Yeah,
for sure.
Agreed.
It's lower for me only because I don't have mania. So when I buy a shit ton of stuff on Amazon, it's just poor decision making. It's not anything to do with mania. So what do Harry Potter and schizophrenic people have in common? Both of them once heard voices in the walls. All right. It's a good joke. But so this is one, I get comments all the time. The only reason I don't like it is because the most comments I get that are like hate comments are like, there are voices in your walls. And I'm like, I don't ever hear voices in my walls. I hear them in the other room sometime. But it's all right. I love that he's like shouting with the wand though.
That's just the best part. It's just Harry Potter.
Yeah, it's a good reference. It's simple, but I wouldn't put it in S tier. B tier maybe? You guys okay? Yeah. I'll put it in B.
Okay, my mother who wants to go on trips all the time because we live in a small shitty town. Me with paranoid hallucinations and delusions that travel worsens. Actually, I can relate to this. It's not very funny to me.
I was gonna say, because I do get more symptoms as I travel.
Yeah.
So like I do get more symptoms, but like you said, I'm like, it's
like,
yeah.
it's okay.
Yeah.
C, it's like mid-tier for me.
I would say C, because there's some truth to it.
Yeah.
And you know.
A majority of the population, schizophrenia. Is this dissociative identity?
Oh,
This
there
is
you
yours.
go.
Oh my God, S tier, S tier. Sorry, no, for real. This is like my everyday struggle because so many people still mix up dissociative identity disorder with schizophrenia. S tier. I'm sorry, guys. I'm overranking
It's
everyone on this.
Very true.
Okay. Autism and ADHD, world's awareness of the conditions, psychotic disorders such as schizophrenia and schizotypical disorder, and they're drowning.
So true, I feel like.
There is a huge amount of creators talking about autism, ADHD. There's so much awareness and support around those. Whereas like bipolar disorder, BPD, schizophrenia, we don't get that. We don't get the awareness. We don't get the support. And so I love that one. I would put that in A or S.
Yeah,
I say
I agree.
A.
I agree.
Okay, we'll do A.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Autism relief, bipolar disorder relief. We're cured with the crystals. ADD,
Oh my God,
that's
it's
like an
actually
actual
labeled.
place.
Oh my God.
Imagine.
Imagine I walk in,
Imagine.
one of the beads says schizophrenia.
We're cured.
I think it's funny just because it's like you really think that's gonna help you.
Right.
Like, not really.
Like once again, I don't want to disparage people's beliefs. I know a lot of people truly believe in this stuff, but a rock isn't gonna fix my issue.
It's not the solution.
And I love crystals. I love that. I love it. But that's pretty extreme, I will say.
Yeah.
That's really
I
extreme.
love that they're actually labeled
Yeah,
and
that's-
stuff too.
I've
like
never
to
seen
me,
that before.
I wish I could read the other ones. Like that's what I was. Where are we putting that one?
That's pretty
Put
up
that
there.
in B.
B.
Okay.
I would say B.
Let's do that.
Yeah, biblically accurate BPD split, and it's just Hello Kitty with a bunch of eyeballs. Biblically accurate.
Okay. I love Hello Kitty, so I don't know. That's
Is
pretty
that
funny.
biblically
I mean,
accurate?
I wouldn't know, to be completely honest with you. I mean, she's cute though. I like her eyeballs. I don't know. I would.
Looks like a bad schizophrenic hallucination.
Yeah,
It really does.
Yeah, I would say like that's like a C probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
C,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Roses are red, violets are blue. I'm schizophrenic, and so am I. Oscar Levant.
I'm gonna maintain my composure, but I might get up and leave. This is the worst meme ever, and I see it so much. It's the most common schizophrenia meme. It's DID, first of all.
Yeah.
It's not schizophrenia. This is F tier. This
F-tier.
is the only one I don't care what you guys say. This is going F tier
I agree.
because it's so bad. But it's like the most shared about schizophrenia.
Yeah, I don't
and
understand.
oh my God, it bothers me. I could go on.
Somebody who's not schizophrenic made that.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
Exactly.
for sure, yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. But it's like, it's always the one I see. And like, because I do reaction videos, people will send this to me all of the time. I hate it. F. Hard F.
Tier.
F.
Our first F tier.
I made a video where someone was like, you don't have schizophrenia. And I just took the comment and I pretended to call my psychiatrist. I'd be like, good news, you were wrong. I don't need the medication anymore. User 13 John Cena said that I am good to go.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you. I was on all this medication for no reason.